Having safely sailed 4,400 miles across the South Atlantic Ocean from Africa to South America, it is time to inspect Florence for damage and make repairs to prepare for our onward voyage to the Caribbean. But we cannot leave this part of French Guiana without experiencing its two most famous attractions. Some idyllic islands with a dark history, and an amazing fireworks display.
We are Amy and Matt. We spent the last 6.5 years sailing our 37-foot sailboat Florence around the world. In that time, we've crossed 4 oceans. Over 40,000 miles have passed under our keel, and we are now closing in on our goal, to complete our circumnavigation.
Having crossed the South Atlantic Ocean, we now have South America and the Caribbean to explore before we cross the Atlantic one more time to return to our starting point in England. One of the main things about crossing the ocean is trying to reduce the amount of damage or wear and tear that we have on board, and we did pretty well crossing 4,400 miles, and we've only got 3 things really that we need to fix now that we're here. First is the genoa. We've got some stitching that's come undone and some wear on the UV strip on the back edge. The second one is the tricolour light at the top of the mast that we use as our navigation light to tell other ships where we are. That stopped working. And the other thing is the VHF radio. Our brand new VHF radio we put in Cape Town stopped working. So first of all, we're going to drop this genoa whilst it's light winds and we're easily, safely anchored here in the river in French Guiana, and get the sewing kit out. So these are the problems we could see when we were sailing across the ocean getting worse. The stitching's gone on this one here, so that's still held by glue. So we need to redo that bit of stitching which is just worn off. Here it's a little bit worse where it's come undone. So we just need to, again, re-stitch that. And then here we've suffered a little bit of wear. This is where it runs across the radar on the mast. So we've got a patch on the sail as a wear patch, but it's worn a little bit on the UV strip. So we're gonna have to put a patch over the back of that and stitch it on there. And then we'll check the rest of the whole sail. And then, once we've done all that, we'll put it back up. This is actually the first time we've had to drop this genoa to do any work on it since we got it over 2.5 years ago. So we've been really happy with it, and this is just normal. This is what you'd expect. We've crossed 2 oceans and been sailing around in the tropics where the UV really affects all the threads and stuff. So actually really happy with how this has lasted.
We don't have a sewing machine on board, which is why we end up doing all of the sail repairs by hand. It takes a while to do it this way, but finding a sailmaker ashore would take even longer. After half a day of sewing, we're able to rehoist the genoa, ready to take on another ocean passage.
I'm now going to climb the mast and try and fix our tricolour light at the top. Because it's right on top of the mast, it's actually really difficult to get to. Normally when you go up the mast, you go on a bosun's chair and you sit in the bosun's chair, but you can only get up so far because the rope that holds you goes to the top of the mast. So this time I'm going to go up with a climbing harness on and the bosun's chair, and when I get to the top I'm going to shimmy out of the bosun's chair and stand on it so that I can actually reach on top of the mast to get at this problem, but the climbing harness will keep me safe up there. So use a topping lift as a safety line on the bosun's chair. You can use the main halyard to actually climb up on.
Matt is fit enough to be able to physically climb up the mast, holding onto the halyards that run either side of it. I tail him on the main halyard, keeping the rope as tight as possible so that he doesn't slide back down as soon as he's hauled himself up. Every few metres, I tighten up the topping lift we use as a second safety line.
I do a general rig inspection every time I climb the mast for another job. Not only does it mean that we're more likely to know of a problem with the rig before it becomes major, but it also gives me an excuse to stop for a couple of rests on the way up. Okay, it's good there. Just going to check the spreaders. I'm looking for any broken strands in the wire rigging and paying special attention to where the wire goes into the fittings and any loose pins or cracks in any of the fittings. Once at the top, I hang on the climbing harness and shimmy the bosun's chair down to my feet. So now, just on the climbing harness. And now I can stand at the bosun's chair and get on top of this. As I wobble it, it flickers. So there's a dodgy connection in there somewhere.
Once Matt is in place, I send up a bucket on a halyard for him to put the parts into and to take out his multimeter so that he can check the power is reaching the masthead light.
So this is our masthead tricolour light and our anchor light below it. So when this is on at sea, we've got a starboard light, a port light and a stern light all in one at the top of the mast. That's why it's called a tricolour. When I went up, it's working, but so it must be an intermittent problem. And when I wobbled it, it did flicker a little bit. So I took it off, I checked with the multimeter that we've definitely got a good voltage up there, and we have. So I think it's something in here that the connection is not very good, and when it wobbles like it does at sea, because this is 16 meters up and it gets wanged around all over the place as we're bouncing over the waves and rolling, that's wobbling and has had a poor connection. So I'm just going to take this apart down here so I don't drop all the bits, see if I can tighten up the connections, and then hopefully it'll work and I can put it back up there. So if I wiggle the bulb in the holder, I can make it flash on and off. So clearly that's what's been happening at the top of the mast. So I need to fix that somehow. Tighten it up, hopefully. In the end, I managed to fix this by just crimping up the bayonet fitting with a big pair of pliers so that this is really solid, it doesn't rock around, and I've tried wobbling it as much as I can and it doesn't flicker on and off. So I think that is now fixed. I just need to go back up to the top of the mast and put it back. When we were at sea on the way here, unfortunately our brand new Summit VHF radio stopped working. It's just frozen, none of the buttons do anything. It will receive on channel 16, but we cannot transmit, which is a major problem if we're at sea, because this is a major safety device to allow us to call for help. I've contacted Summit, and unfortunately the only thing that they're allowing us to do is to send it back to Summit in South Africa for them to analyse it, even though I've offered to show them a video of exactly what's going on, and well, it's just not working. So we're in South America, this needs to go back to South Africa. That's going to cost a lot to post it there, and I'm not sure we're even going to get a resolution then. They've just gone completely quiet. But we've still got the problem that this is our major safety device. So luckily when we put this in, I actually kept our old Cobra VHF radio, and the problem with this was that the push to talk button doesn't work very well on it. It's a little bit intermittent, you've got to hold it in just the right place, so we wanted to replace it. But ultimately this is also a DSC radio, and the DSC button does work, so if we have a problem, even if the intermittent button on here causes a problem, we should be able to press the DSC button and send a call for help. So what I've now got to do is take this useless piece of junk Summit radio out and put the old one in, and hopefully at least we'll have a partial working radio to get us into the Caribbean, and where there hopefully we can then buy a new one which won't be a Summit one. Okay, so time to test this. Breaker on, Power on. Seems good. Florence machine, testing, testing, over.
Florence, this is the machine, reading you loud and clear, over.
Okay, so at least we have a working radio. Might have a slightly dodgy push to talk button. That was Amy on the handheld on deck, just for testing. Okay, back in business.
After 4,400 miles of ocean sailing, that's actually a really short list of things to have to fix. Over the years, we've learned to sail Florence more conservatively. We now spot changes in the weather a lot sooner, and we prepare Florence well in advance, meaning that we rarely actually break anything. That's very different from our first ocean passage when we snapped the boom in half and broke the spinnaker pole.
Fixing Florence after the ocean crossing is not actually our biggest challenge here. Our biggest challenge is to catch up on the video editing. Other than a couple of brief stops in St Helena and Fernando de Noronha, we've been at sea for a couple of months. And although we spend a lot of time filming when we're at sea, we don't have time for video editing. The rest of our time is taken up with sailing Florence and sleeping. And also it's too rough at sea to sit here and edit video.
So now that we're in a calm anchorage, we have a lot of editing to catch up on. It takes us about 2 hours for every 1 minute of finished video. So we have about 350 hours of editing to do to generate the episodes that you will have now watched between Namibia and here in French Guiana.
But watching us sit in front of laptops and edit is worse than watching paint dry. So we'll skip on to exploring French Guiana.
The islands off the coast of French Guiana have a dark past. So we took Florence out of the river and went ashore to explore them. So we've come out of the river to 3 islands about 10 miles off the coast called Ille de Salut. They're absolutely gorgeous tropical islands, but they're famous, particularly in France, for not a very nice reason. They're actually part of the penal colony, which was huge in this area from about the 1850s right through until the 1950s. So during that time, a lot of the most serious criminals from France were actually shipped out here to French Guiana. And even during those times, the islands and this area had a really bad reputation given how brutal they were and the number of people that just died from tropical diseases. So a lot of the prisoners never returned to France. Around the other side from where Florence is anchored, you've actually got Devil's Island, and this is the most famous island out of the 3. This is where all of the political prisoners were sent to.
In preparation for coming here to these islands, we watched the film Papillon, which is based on an autobiography of somebody who actually was imprisoned on these islands and escaped multiple times. Now, one of the scenes in the film is of him escaping from Devil's Island at the end. But in the film, he jumps off a massive cliff. And clearly on the actual Devil's Island, there is no massive cliff. It's just gentle slope into the sea. It's rocky, there's currents that will make it difficult to escape, but there's no cliffs.
There's tons of wildlife, as you can hear. But unfortunately a lot of it's really camera shy. We've seen 2 different types of monkeys. And hundreds of these rodents, what we think are called agoutis. Even after spending some time here, it's still really hard to get our heads around the scale of the prisons in French Guiana. This is huge, but this is just one small prison on one tiny island, and there were so many all along this coastline of French Guiana. The island you can see behind me is Ille St. Joseph, which is where people were sent if they tried to escape from either this island or some of the many other prisons around the area, and they were put into some really brutal conditions and solitary confinement on that island.
This place is absolutely massive and actually a bit spooky.
These are the cells where they put people into solitary confinement, and this is where Papillon spent 2 years. Some of these cells were totally blacked out, so that people were in total darkness. It's really eerie. So part of the reason that the cells have got the bars on the top is that the prisoners were under total observation 24 hours a day.
So this ties in with the film, because you see when he gets put into darkness, they actually put boards on top of this, and you see the guards walking along just above it. It's been terrible. It's amazing how nature is taking over this place. This tree is growing on top of the wall with its roots coming down around, and all through the whole of this complex there are trees growing and their roots are kind of running around the corridors. It's like they're growing in the cells but then escaping from the prison themselves. They didn't actually stop using this place as a prison until the 1950s. But it's amazing that in, 70 years? How fast nature has taken over and just destroying the buildings and reversing it to nature, I guess.
We're just watching these leaf cutter ants. There's a huge trail of them carrying food back to their nest. It's amazing how much they can carry for the size of them.
Back up the river, we were ready for the main event that we've been waiting for here in French Guiana. 2 weeks after we checked in, they were due to have a huge fireworks display, and we were keen to watch.
Today's the launch day for the Ariane 5, so we've come up to the Space Center to watch the launch. There's a viewing station which allows you to see the rocket take off, and then they have also some big screens that they project the launch on. And it's totally free to come up here. We had to apply for special permission, but they even brought us up in a bus from the town.
The Ariane 5 is the largest rocket launched by the European Space Agency. It weighs 780 tonnes and can launch a 10-ton payload into orbit. To put that into perspective, Florence, when she is fully loaded, weighs 10 tonnes, so this could launch her into space. The rocket in the foreground is a model. The real rocket is safely 12 kilometres away.
We're really close to liftoff now, and all of the indicators are green, so it looks like it's going to go ahead.
That was really cool. First time I've ever seen a space rocket launch. The sound takes 40 seconds to reach us from the launch pad, so you saw all the bright flame coming out the back of it first, and then 40 seconds later the sound, the rumble just reached us, and it really just like vibrated us. It was really, really cool. That's a very powerful rocket.
That was awesome. It was way more impressive than I thought it was going to be, and I'm so glad that we have hung around for a couple of weeks to wait for that to happen. Definitely worth it. I think that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and if you ever get the chance to be in this area or near a space centre, you should definitely see a launch.
Next time we set sail along the coast of South America, aiming for a dawn arrival at the mouth of the Moroni River, where we plan to sail Florence upstream and into the jungle.
Don't forget to subscribe to catch the next episode. We release a video every 2 weeks.
If you'd like to find out more about behind the scenes on Florence, track our progress across the oceans in real time, find out where we are right now, or ask us pretty much anything, then please head over to our Patreon site and join the crew. We would like to thank everyone who supports us to make these videos possible, and a special thank you to our star patrons.